on. But before we get into our subject matter discussion, like I said, we'll talk about that later. The Atlanta General Constitution. We have a article from Neil George Chida, and so we'll get into that in just a moment. But first, let's talk about next week when I come on. The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down affirmative action, and we'll be talking about that next weekend on the Lawyers and Podcast show. Good evening. I'm sorry that we came on a little bit late. At 7 o'clock. We're supposed to be coming on the Lawyers and Podcast show Sunday at 7 p.m. But we are here. We're here, ladies and gentlemen. Like, share, and subscribe. The Black media is here. Now, yeah, these old bootlicking Negroes in Atlanta is still up to no good. Okay. But like I said, before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be discussing as it relates to the topic of striking down affirmative action. I think when you look at this landmark decision that has been in place for decades, almost 3 decades, I should say, that's almost 30-something years or more. To have affirmative action in admissions of testing or getting into college, that was one of the most important things for colleges, universities when it came to diversity. So I think the Asian community, and of course the Asian guy who did this, I think he kind of shot himself in the foot with this decision and helping the white supremacists to continue their little game, their stupid little games that they like to play. And I always call them stupid little games because that's what the white supremacists do. They like to play stupid little games, and they will find some Black person or some Hispanic or Asian people that is always going to help them do their bidding. Okay, what is worse with the white supremacists is that they got somebody that is not white, that would help them. This is the reason why we know Black people, we have no Black and Brown coalition. There's no kind, excuse me, there is no kind of Black and Brown coalition. Okay, that's the reason why we know it, because a lot of these Asians, a lot of these Latinos, Hispanics, whatever you want to call them, Mexicans, all of these people are in cahoots with these white supremacists. And then they only recognize this when they start doing little stupid stuff to them. But we'll talk about that next week. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. Excuse me. All right, yeah, we're talking today, though, however, a subject that I've been wanting to discuss about these bootlicking Negroes down here in Atlanta who's trying to do Cop City. And the problem here is that there's a lot of people in Atlanta who is against this. And you got old bootlicking Andrew Dickens, who is also in the pocket of trying to basically, he's on game, because as long as the Black people do what these white folks want, they don't care about who's in leadership. They just basically want their little position and want to keep their little position and to be a Black front for the white supremacists. And this is what's going on here in Atlanta as well. Okay. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. Now, I told you I have an article here that I've been working on and reading and stuff like this. And I'm not going to bore you with the entire article, because we're going to basically just do this. Or talk about this, and we'll wrap up. You know what I'm saying? I probably only need about 30 to 45 minutes today of your time. Like, share, and subscribe. You can also leave your comments. The Lawyer Henderson podcast show is live. If you want to send a email of a story that you want us to cover here, please send it to cinemacitykpictures@gmail.com. We'll start leaving the email address so you can send a story to us at cinemacitykpictures@gmail.com. I'm going to try to change all the email addresses so that you can send a story directly to the website once we get that up. And of course, You can always send a donation to the Cash App at $ lawyer Henderson 40. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is basically a huge problem that we're facing here in Atlanta. Activists, other people, of course, myself and others, we are against this cop city stuff. And so what they've been doing in Atlanta, they've been off code for some years. Of course, Atlanta being supposedly the LGBT gay capital, black capital of the world. Okay, which of course I really don't support. But here's the problem: Atlanta City Council has given Cop City $30 million, and they're supposed to get more money. And I think it's also a proposal to give them 90 million, of course. So the article reads, and no one believes in Cop City. So why did Atlanta City Council fund it? The fight could influence whether Georgia stays blue in 2024's Senate and presidential race. So they believe that if they don't change their mind about this, that it can go back red, the state. Because remember, for Biden, they basically voted for him here in Georgia, but typically they would have voted for a candidate like Donald Trump, or they would have voted for another Republican. I think when George Bush won, I think he won Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. But the article starts us out is that last week, as Atlanta was observing yet another piece of bad news about its snake big proposal for a new police and fire training facility, that is what caused the public twice as much as it had been discussed. MSNBC host Chris Hayes said, "What much of the national audience must be thinking." I have to say, I followed this story from afar and only moderately closely, but I remain mystified why Atlanta's officials are just so intent on building this thing, he tweeted. The city first accepted the proposal to build the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, Cop City, in a vernacular, a 90 million, 85-acre campus just outside of the city proper. Wow. Hold on, let me get it here. Proper while crime was rising in 2021. But also, while the wounds of the George Floyd, Rashad Brooks protest was still healing, a multi-million-dollar police training center in the middle of the forest, which little transparency or recourse for voters, felt like a slap in the face to the people who have been marching Atlanta flat for democracy. An interesting way to start that off in his article here. Okay. This was an interesting article here, but to stay with it, I think, he's going to basically try to maneuver here in just a moment. Let's see. The plan called for the city up to pay about $33 million today and another $1.2 million a year for the next 30 years to cover debt for the entity building it. Now, listen to what they're saying. The entity that's building it, the Atlanta Police Foundation, that public cost is about twice as high as was reported in late 2021, when the proposal was first authorized, and comes after nearly 2 years of streeted opposition by residents and activists far and wide. City officials are quietly arguing that this was always the cost and that everyone has simply been mistaken, despite no real efforts made to correct the mistake before local journalists at the Atlanta Community Press Collective dug closely through the figures. But here's the thing. The Atlanta City Council still voted to fund Cop City early Tuesday morning by a vote of 11-4. Now, here's the thing. You got old Julian Bonds down here. He's been eating off the taxpayers for years, man. he always going to side with these white supremacists because he want to stay in there and just, he's already made a career out of this, and he always going to do what the white supremacists want him to do so he won't get in trouble because, he just basically one of them bootlicking Negroes who just want to eat, okay? But here's the thing about what they're basically proposing. They did this behind closed doors, and these politicians, these black politicians, the only way that they can get something done in the city is it has to be something that is non-economically to black folks. Whether you build a police department or fire department or a park or something like that, a recreational center, these black politicians cannot provide the black community with nothing economically. And it's no point of voting for them anymore. It's just not. It's no point of voting, period, as people are saying. Anticipating a potential disruption, Mayor Andrew Dickens closed City Hall for regular business on Monday and banned outside liquids in the building, airport security style. Dozens of cops hovered at the edge of the City Hall's atrium as hundreds of people waited hours and hours for their turn to voice their opposition. Virtually everyone here stood against the proposal. Now, he was going on the national news saying that these were not local people, that these were just people out of the city and out of the state. But what you have to recognize is, no, local people are against this too, okay? Because they went behind closed doors and did this. There's no vote for the people or nothing, which you basically are forcing taxpayers to pay for something, but you're doing things behind closed doors with the interests of these white folks. Anticipating the potential, moments after the vote, activists shouted threats at the city council members. At one point, an activist lunged over to rallying between the crowds and the dais to shout, "I will fucking find your ass," as council member Jason Winston, a ring of cops separating the two. The short answer to Hayes' question is that officials don't think there are practical alternatives to replace the city at havoc, dilapidated, unsuitable facilities are any better. And they believe that people aren't angry because of disruptive over Cop City's costs of the environmental challenges associated with the land, but because the city messaging was badly bundled. Critically, City Hall's leaders believe that the potential electoral blowback is limited. In another city, a training facility might be a particle argument, but like all things in Atlanta politics, state and national politics forces come to bear. Georgia is all too often the center of political universe, and conflict descends upon its up-tempo circadians in the summer. Okay? In other words, Atlanta has been a city where politics have just been controversial. And it's always going to get controversial, especially when you have black folks there, because the white people are expecting for black people to do exactly what they want done. And this is why you got Negroes like Andrew Dickens and Keisha Lance Bottoms and Kasim Reeds. This is the reason why you got these people. You understand? It goes on to say that Cop City caught between 4 different groups with 4 different political agendas. On one side, police abolitionists has made opposition to Cop City their shibboleth, the shibboleth, a sign of ideology, fidelity to anti-authoritarian principles. They're not negotiating. Police are pitching a mock city to train police how to enter building in an active shooting situation. Opponents asked the council to consider all the ways of the 90 million might be used to keep that shooting from happening in the first place, likening the training center to a medieval fort in a occupied city of the infamous schools of Americas at what we used to call Fort Benning. Okay, graffiti declaring that Cop City would never be built, ornaments that fame Krog Street Tunnel, and overpasses and subway pylons and street signs. The energy of youth and activists, a product of 4 years of hard-fought progressive politics in this state and this city, organically suffice their messaging as both an appeal to Atlanta's left-leaning public and as the national call to fight. National observers might try to connect the Stop Cop City movement to political forces that elected 2 U.S. senators and denied Donald Trump a presidency. But that's not quite it, because the protesters are just as pissed off as Democrats as anyone else. After all, the decision makers for the city of Atlanta are almost all Democrats. The mayor is a Democrat. At least 12 of the city's 15 council members are Democrats, and 8 of the Democrats voted to pass the ordinance. Okay? Now that can change, ladies and gentlemen, what this article is saying here. Directly opposite the abolitionist stands a decidedly Republican opponent, Georgia's Attorney General Chris Carr. Carr is a politically ambitious prosecutor who will almost certainly run for the highest office in 2026. He is not exactly counting on the Atlanta vote to propel him to the governor's mansion. This is to the degree that Cop City is a political question. Carr wants to show a statewide Republican primary audience that he is willing to confront Antifa and anti-fascists and domestic terrorists on the terms Georgia conservative base would find acceptable. Okay. Now, here's the problem with what they're so far as what the activists are saying. They're saying that the training facility is not needed because cops can train at the police academy. Okay. What this was about was, if you all don't want Buckhead to be a city, this is what these investors are saying, these white business people, because they're trying to bring businesses in there, because of course they're going to always say that black people are the problem, even though they don't want to give us the resources. But basically what this is, it says, if you niggers, if y'all want to stop the city of Buckhead to becoming a city, well, you niggers are going to have to agree to a facility in the heart of between Atlanta and DeKalb County. And we're going to have a militarized system because we see in other states where, you got people looting, you got crime, of course, out there in California, and we don't want our businesses to be like this. So you niggers here in Atlanta, y'all better agree to this, okay? And Mayor Bootlick and Andrew Dickens, just like his predecessor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, they decided to build this training facility, and they did so, like I said, behind the people's back, okay? Now, it goes in to talk about, the young man who the cops shot here. And that was one of the most important thing that I think his mother was recently was here, or she spoke out recently about the situation. But the article, go ahead and read that as crime rose in Atlanta during the pandemic, Carr and the state have responded by stepping up enforcement while ignoring local sensibilities. The Georgia State Patrol began car chasing in ways that the Atlanta Police Department wouldn't consider, increasingly resulting in deadly crashes. It wasn't an Atlanta police officer who shot the environmentalist activist Manuel Tortuguita Turan, dead in January near the Cop City site. An autopsy report laid responsibility on 6 Georgia State Patrol officers. The killing set off new waves of activists and media attention. Activists tied that death and the city's liberal leadership to the same illiberal forces in state government and in corporate Georgia who would criminalize dissent. 4 cars crowd concern raids by the city leaders. Read Democrats about using state police and terrorism statutes to constrain civil protests are unimportant at best to aspirational Republican leaders and a side benefit in practice. Okay? In other words, these activists are acknowledging what Black people have been saying all along, that they have been always trying to build a police state where Black folks is, and that we've been telling them that we're not wanting these police officers in the Black community over policing us. Okay? And this is what this is about. They are trying to recruit these police officers to over police our communities, and this is how it's been. And that's the only reason how the Black politicians can get in office, because they have to speak on so-called crime in the Black community, and therefore that crime is used to fight white folks, and then white people is supporting the Black community, the Black politicians in ways into which they get crumbs from white folks' tables and then leave the Black community empty-handed, you see. What is happening to state Republicans are using the vote on this proposed project to launch themselves into office for the next cycle, said James Woodall, public policy advocate for Southern Center for Human Rights. The silence by Democrats to let that happen demonstrates why this state is not blue. So basically, they always want to use this right and left thing. No, this is about the Democrats doing policies and enforcing policies and anti-Black hatred against Black folks. This is what they have always been doing. And they have always did this and continue to do this. And people are woke about it, and they're upset that we basically are confronting this here. It's just that other activists might be, or other races might be fighting a different tune here, okay? But they basically know that Atlanta is the hub for these outrageous policy. This is why these Negro politicians in Atlanta have always been off code. They have always been in bed with their paymasters. And what we're doing is we're calling them out on their bull crap, okay? Thumbs up. If you like what you hear, thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you leave a comment if you want to. We're trying something different. This is our live screen here. The article goes on to say that then on Thursday, police raided a house near the facility, which had been an activist staging ground for protests. Cops picked up 3 activists, Marlon Scott Cox, 39, and Adele McLean, 42, both of Atlanta, and Savannah Patterson is 30, of Savannah, Georgia. Each was charged with money laundering and charity fraud. The arrest introduced yet another challenge to the progressive credentials of city leaders in Atlanta, an attack on the mechanism of protest in the city is historically defined by the city's civil rights struggle. But what Atlanta police officers conducted arrests, it was Carr's office who drove them. Georgia Bureau of Investigation's office swore out the arrest warrant before the Cobb County Superior Court judge, describing the 3 activists as part of a group classified by the United States Department of Homeland Security as domestic violence extremists. The local district attorney, Sherry Boston, didn't argue the state case against Bond for the 3 in front of the magistrate court judge. Deputy Attorney General John Fowler from Carr's office made that argument instead. The judge was unimpressed. I'm concerned about some of the same things that the defense attorney mentioned about the line between legitimate free speech and crossing into illegal violent acts, says the Cobb Magistrate Court Judge James Altman. Paying for camping supplies and the like, I don't find it very impressive. There's not a lot of meat on the bones of the allegations that thousands of dollars are going to fund illegal activities, end quote. Altman actually wished the three arrestees good luck and wondered what the state was thinking. Okay. And so now they lost that because it was basically a lie that they were not terrorizing anybody. And so now, they're back at it to see what they're going to try to do next as far as Cop City. But the article from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution goes on to, well, this is from the Intercept, goes on to say that Dickens won Atlanta mayor election in 2021 with a mandate amid one of the fastest increases of violent crime in the city's history. But the political machine Dickens inherited is built out of Bonto, duct tape, and baling wire. City Hall's relationship with both the public and its police department was ruined by neglect and the erosion of trust that began in 2020 with the police shooting of Brooks and continued with the soft blue flu sick out that police subsequently staged in protest of charges laid on the two cops who shot him. Okay. Dickens have been a one-man army repairing relationships across the board, meeting fraternically with neighborhood groups and civic organizations while fending off a spurious initiative to separate Atlanta's wealthiest Buckhead neighborhood into a new city. He also clevered every closer to the Atlanta Police Foundation, which is funding Cop City with $30 million in donations collected from the city's corporate sector, and to the other organizations that Dickens believed could rebuild the fray relationship to the police. The foundation's administrators, the city's ever expensive Karen network helps fund housing in the city for police officers, operates the city's gang unit diversion centers, and has helped run the analytics on the city's target repeat offenders enforcement plan. Yeah, these are the people that y'all send back into the community to corrupt, to start more crime. And these people are the same folks that y'all bring out here over and over and over so that y'all can use these analogies of, oh, these are repeat offenders. Well, you need to your repeat offenders when when the white media is trying to prove that you all are saying that there's an increase of black on black crime or there's an increase on crime in general. This is how y'all use y'all little flunkies that y'all arrest and call them repeat offenders. You see? It goes on to say that in the city's homicide rate year to date has fallen about 35% and is trending back to the pre-pandemic baseline. While Atlanta's crime increase was fourth fastest in America for its largest city, its fall has been just as fast. 1 year ago, Atlanta has recorded about 167 homicides in the previous 365 days. The annual count is 134 a week ending May 27, an annualized rate of about 26 per 100,000 residents. If the city holds at the current pace, it will record 107 homicides in 2023, only 7 more than 19 more than the 2019 low. So more than the 2019 low. One can attribute the fall in homicides to many things, just as the sharp spike in 2020 had many causes. The administration points to ever more aggressive enforcement around gangs, guns, and drugs. Okay? Now, this is the same typical white media crap, okay? And I'm not going to continue to read as much more. We'll get to, well, if we do read more, we'll get to my point later here if we have to read more. But this is the same typical, you know, white male uh, and white female propaganda, is to say that crime is up in the black neighborhoods, crime is up in these cities, blah 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 blah. Um, they're basically not really talking about the truth here regarding crime. They're not even talking about the reasons why crime is so called up in these neighborhoods, even the city. Okay, and to have a this militarized training facility is not going to stop so-called crime. Okay, bringing money and economics and business into the black communities is what's going to stop crime. Okay, in other words, the city of Atlanta is trying to, again, like any other city where black politicians are in power and white people are behind closed doors and they're running the whole show. These are situations where you're going to continue to have the same kind of rhetoric going on about so-called gangs, guns, drugs, blah, blah, blah. Stuff that the white supremacists know that some black fools are going to fall into their dirty trap. And of course, if crime is down, the white supremacists have done in the 1990s, they had to do what? They had to basically go out and just accuse people of crime. I mean, just imagine how many black men and women getting out of jail now, but specifically black men who have basically are just now getting out of jail the 1970s and 80s and 90s for crimes that they did not commit, you see. So we have to look at white folks in the definition of crime. Why is the white community so obsessed with so-called black on black violence when we know that white on white crime is out of control in the white community? Okay? White on white crime is way out of control in the white neighborhoods, but yet the white media want to focus on a facility in black neighborhoods. And they do this because they have to project up on other people and claim that they need to stop their criminal behavior, when the people who are basically doing most of the criminal activities are white folks, specifically white men. Okay? So there's no real quote unquote crime in the black neighborhoods, as these people are claiming there are. There's no legitimate reason to have a facility in the black neighborhoods where the people are saying, no, it's not going to work for us. Okay? We have often stated that we do not want our neighborhoods over police. Okay? And not wanting our neighborhoods over police, but wanting to do what? Bring economics, in which the black politicians have helped to keep out of our neighborhoods. And this is the reason why black people have given up on voting. Okay, as I told you, that voting is down in the black community. That people are not even going out to vote because these politicians are going to just go behind closed doors, especially the black ones, and they're going to get in bed and sleep in bed with the white corporations, the police foundations, and all the rest, you see. And people are sick and tired of playing that game. But the black on black crime is a myth. It is a myth based upon white people projecting crime and the white media projecting crime in the neighborhoods, in the communities and then the black men who foolishly fall for their foolishness and therefore basically are set up in the criminal justice system in order to go back, because when you give these young men and young people felonies and stuff, that now they can't get a job, they can't go out and be productive in society, and then they become a Pookie and Ray Ray, and then you start putting them in jail, and here comes the white media talking about, well, black on black crime is out of control. Okay, and therefore, in order to protect business and property, well, we got to basically set up a huge facility to stop and combat crime. Well, if that's the case, then why you don't put the facility in the white neighborhoods? Because the white neighborhood is filled with white on white crime. Okay, white people in criminality of against black people. White people basically has been the biggest criminals. So why not put the facility in the white neighborhoods? You see? And so, of course, the black politicians are not going to talk about the fact that by giving us non-economic resources in our neighborhoods, that this is the reason why so-called black on black violence is happening. See, you got to basically, as I often said before, you got to take economics away from the black community in order to then stress crime. Because when people basically doesn't have nothing to eat or anything, they engage in crime. Okay? So when he talked there about homicide rates and all that stuff, the white media and the white newspaper and the online media has to project these lies and increase these numbers. And when nobody is really actually, is looking at the statistics as to what they're trying to point out, because white folks only measures things by statistics and numbers. They never, ever basically base anything up on direct proof. They always have to do like some type of statistical evaluation or something that their statistics fall in from a previous year or a previous time in the history of black neighborhoods where black people were falling for the white man's game of getting into drugs and gangs, getting into selling of drugs, these types of things that is supposed to represent crime and criminal behavior. You see, and we have to look at that as difference in terms of what crimes the white community does versus what crime do black people engage in. Okay, a white man can steal from a corporation. That's a crime, but he doesn't have to go out and necessarily shoot a black man or a white man in the head because he is in a position of that where he can steal from a major corporation and not steal or just actually go out and kill someone to rob some type of store, if you said, and such, you see. We go ahead and go on to the next paragraph here on the Intercept. And they talk here that when it comes to Cop City, the city has never had a plan B. The general consensus is that the current situation is untenable. The police department rents classroom space at Atlanta Metro State College with hands-on training in neighboring jurisdictions. The fire department had been training in a vacant elementary school, which is now condemned. No credible alternative has been discussed, and the 6-year process of planning for a new police training facility ending this project was set the process back to square one. In the absence of training facilities owned by the city, Atlanta will pay whatever the market demands, said Chida Spikes, a city spokesman for the project. The Atlanta Public Safety Training Center is more than a recruiting tool or a facility for progressive police training. It is necessary cost containment, she said. Okay. Okay. She said Chida Spikes. Where does this woman come from? This morning's vote approval the budget resolution for the Atlanta Public Training Center marks a majority milestone for better preparing our fire, police, and emergency responders to protect and serve our communities. The mayor said in a statement, We know that there has been a passionate feelings and opinions about the training center. I know there is more work to be done. I am committed to building trust, blah, 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 blah. And my administration looks forward to continue the conversation the weeks ahead, blah, 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 blah. Okay. The typical bull crap that these black politicians and white politicians always say. Okay, why are you not out there supporting businesses, black businesses, and businesses in communities? Why a police station? Doesn't make sense. People do not want their neighborhoods over police. It's just that simple. Okay, now here was it get very interesting. It says here the last side is the Atlanta public, exerting whatever influence it can on the other three. Most Atlanta residents are neither policing abolitionists nor cop cheerleaders. Many neighborhoods, including majority black, overwhelmingly Democratic communities on Atlanta's west side, measures the city by its responsiveness to neighborhood blight, traffic problems, and crime. Conceptually, a police training center isn't inherently controversial to most Atlantans. Now, that basically is true and false. Okay. The situation is that if the Atlanta Police Department is wanting, see, they know that they can build a training facility anywhere. Okay. They don't have to have a huge training center in the middle of the forest. Okay. And so to a certain extent, yeah, a police training center is necessary, but it does not need to be huge like what they're proposing. You don't need $90 million to fix a training facility so that the police can feel good about themselves. That's not what this is about. They have training academies. And you might say, well, they're in abandoned schools or whatever. Okay, we'll fix up those schools and get the training. Okay, but it doesn't matter how many training that the police get. They're going to always have an anti-black sentiment. They're going to always be in the black communities because it's not about training. It's about trying to over-police our communities and trying to make white folks and the black cops or whatever feel good about themselves because they took an L during the George Floyd uprising. Okay? And they're upset about it. The article goes on to say here that it also isn't being built in any of their backyards. Rather than muddle through one of the city's criminous planning fights, city leaders alighted on a plan to build Cop City on a city's own land that wasn't actually in the city, but in a neighboring county. A quirk in the state law allows them to sidestep the normal planning and zoning process that way. The most vocal neighborhood-level opposition has come from the city council district closest to the Cop City site, Atlanta 5th District, held by Lillian Baitaria. And 4 of the other 9 districts shows significant opposition. Political observers say when Cop City budget proposal came up for discussion in the Atlanta City Council 2 weeks ago, hundreds of opponents came in line, winding through the marble hall onto the street. The chamber recorded 7 hours of public comment, which not one single speaker in favor of this project. So in other words, if it's not controversial, or if most Atlantas did not really say that they want it or they don't want it, well, why would these people march in to say that they didn't want it? Everybody was saying no to this situation. They were saying, no, we don't want this training facility. So this writer is just contradicting himself based upon the fact that even though there's the people who you're saying in Atlanta who doesn't want it, well, there's people who showed up to the city council and voted opposition against it, you see. And so it goes on to say here Your hands are not tied. You are the rope. Rahai Malhotra, founder and executive director of the Center for I hope I said his name right. Center for Civic Innovation in Atlanta, said at 3:20 a.m. among last speakers of the night, imploring the council to change its position. But city council members voted to fund a facility believe opposition is too diffuse in the remaining districts to create a political opening for a challenger. And the city council members believe that the distinction to be made between highly motivated activists enjoying the speckle of freewheeling public comments and the quiet masses who don't attend hearings at city council. All four of the no votes came from the members elected in 2021. Three of Atlanta's 15 city council members are elected citywide. Among them, only Keisha Waits, who replaced Dickens on the council, voted against the funding. Joining Bahatari from the well-gentrified East Atlanta, Jason Dozier, who represent parts of downtown Atlanta and much of the Atlanta University Center area with the city famed historically black colleges, and Antonio Lewis, whose district start with the rapidly gentrifying Capitol View neighborhood and ends in some of the South Atlanta's poorest neighborhoods. Okay? Questions have been building about Cop City since its first hearing. How would the Atlanta Police Foundation raise its end of the cost? From which corporate donors? How would they administer the property? Who would get to get trained there? Would police really engage in military-style training? How can we tell the environmental remediation claims made by the city would be served? How does the facility connect with the city purported commitment to criminal justice reform and social justice? It's not. Okay. What about mental health training? What does the cost so much, and why does it cost so much? The mayor's office have wanted to manage the narrative, so it's instructed the Atlanta Police Foundation to refer all public inquiries to the city hall and to claim up. The city and to claim up. Oh man, what did they say? The city appointed an advisory committee which stopped having meetings once protests escalated. The mayor appointed a new advisory committee with some Cop City critics on the panel, then initially declared that its meeting would be held privately. Dickens quickly reversed himself, but by then the damage had been done. The result has been a disaster as protests intensified and the Atlanta political failure to register public discontent compounded on itself without credible answers. Meanwhile, Republicans at the state level have done, well, whatever they thought was very necessary, without regard to the political challenges they created for Atlanta leaders. Superior Court judge describing the three activists as part of a classified by the United States Department of Homeland Security as domestic extremists. Okay? Now, that is the whole thing here. So they're basically saying, hey, we're going to build this damn thing and we don't care what y'all say. That's how these politicians were getting down until they got some real clapback from the people. The people said, well, we're not wanting this facility, and they still trying to put this facility on. They're still trying to do it. And so when you ask the Atlanta Police Foundation, why is this huge training facility necessary? Okay, why not just rebuild the academies that you all have and rebuild that, and you'll save a lot of money, and then you invest the $90 million into, other businesses and economics inside the community. And so that we talk there about crime and other things in black neighborhoods or even poor white neighborhoods. See, this is not something they want to do here. They want to continue to just basically make the police officers who took an L during George Floyd and Rayshard Brooks's uprising. This is where y'all should all meet at in case these niggers get out of line again. You see, and this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to make the police officers feel good. Okay. This is a feel good $90 million training facility, you see. But that's not going to make you feel good because there's actually been a decline in people wanting to become police officers and firefighters. And there's also been a decline of people basically wanting to join the military that these politicians can't address either, you see. So let alone building a training facility, which then the cost means that the citizens have to fund the bill, and then you're gonna have to rent out places and spaces there so that you can get monies in order to maintain the facility there. But then what they're doing is they're going to rely upon the taxpayers and then charge them money to keep it running because it's a foot in the bill from the city where they are the ones that charge the city, the citizens, of course, from the taxes, and then that's going to really is where the money coming from to maintain the facility. And then, so why is there not a vote from the people to ask to see if they want such a facility? They're doing everything behind closed doors at the hands of not only the Atlanta Police Foundation, but these white owners and business corporations who said that, okay, if you don't want the city of Buckhead to become a city, well, we're going to need a police training facility so that the police can respond in case these niggers start robbing our stores, you see. And this is what this is about here. Okay. And so, yeah, this is all game. This is all a game. This is something that these black politicians typically always do, try to show out in front of their white paymasters. This is every time you look and say, hey, we're going to stand behind a black politician, just like what's going on with Brandon Johnson in Chicago. These black politicians are cowards, man. And that's why we basically not only given up on voting, but we had also decided that we need our politicians to come from the black grassroots. Bottom line, okay? So anyway, we're wrapping up here. You've been listening to the Lawyers and Podcast show. I didn't want to go into it that long, but I did. But join me next week when we talk there about the U.S. Supreme Court striking down this decision regarding the affirmative action laws. This is a historic situation where for 30 years affirmative action has been for beneficial to mostly white women, actually. But we'll talk about it next week and what we can expect now that the affirmative action laws have been basically overturned by the conservative U.S. Supreme Court. Everything that the U.S. Supreme Court has been done has been race-based, especially against black folks. But we'll talk about it next weekend on the weekend at 7 p.m. on the Lawyers and Podcast show. And we're going to also be in our regular scheduled program as far as our music is concerned. 7 p.m. I'm going to try to come on, but if I'm not, ladies and gentlemen, just make sure that you listen until I come on around 7 o'clock. Okay? So it might be 7:10 or whatever, but we're going to come on and we're going to do our thing like we always do. Well, that is it for us today. Keep it right here on the Lawyers and Podcast show where we continue to bring you with news you can use, the black version of our political struggle, and also to basically demand reparations, demand black business and a black agenda from these bootlicking, butt-dancing politicians and their white paymasters. This is the number one show that is making the charge. I'm Lawyer Henderson. Thank you for listening to me. And again, don't forget to like, share, leave your comments, subscribe to our channel. And you can also will soon be able to hear us on other platforms like Rumble. And we're going to be also on Spotify pretty soon. And you'll be able to purchase any of our old or listen to our old broadcast if you like to basically listen to it and to go over some other video essays and subject matters that we dealt with here on the Loyalty Podcast Show. So that's all for today, ladies and gentlemen. Good night and have a blessed day.